Hey everyone! Today I would like to talk to you about exposing OpenEdge ABL code as a REST API. What components you will need and what steps you'll need to take without writing any code beyond the ABL. Exposing data from your application through a standardized protocol such as REST or OpenData is becoming a more important part of doing business. Since it is necessary to have data available in your environment for other apps, users and processes, it is important to be able to explore your data fast and reliable. I will show you how ConnectPlaza achieves this. First off, I have an OpenEdge app server that is running some ABL code that produces customer data in XML format. This procedure takes an input variable that can specify a customer ID to look for a specific customer in the database. We are going to reuse this existing functionality to expose the data through a REST API using JSON. We will be exposing two REST functions: getCustomers, which will retrieve a list of all customers, and getCustomerById, which will retrieve a single customer based on its ID. The REST functions will deliver the data in JSON format. In order to achieve this, we will add a new flow that will use a REST consumer to expose the flow as a REST API. By creating a new flow called getCustomersFlow, we will begin by adding a new empty flow to our interface. Next step, we will add a REST listener on the consumer side and a message reply on the producer side. This is necessary to create a fully synchronous REST API flow. Next, we will click on the REST consumer to configure this building block. We will need to configure the way the consumer receives messages from the client and how it will detect the REST GET parameters. First off, we will define a context path. This will be added to the base URL so clients can connect to this flow. The base URL is HTTP localhost port 8088. We will configure this flow on context path /customers. In order for our REST client to use REST parameters, we will scroll down to the REST pattern option. Here we can specify what parameter this flow needs to receive in order to function. By default, this flow will always work when no parameters are provided, which is exactly what we want for our getCustomers function. But for our getCustomersById function, we want to specify an ID. This is where the REST pattern comes into play. By specifying /customers/ and then customer ID in brackets / and then the two accolades, we can tell the consumer to handle messages that provide a REST parameter called customer ID in lowercase, which is then followed by a / and value for this ID. This way, the client can specify a customer ID in the URL. Finally, we will set the REST parameters as XML option to true to ensure that ConnectPlaza will add all REST parameters in the request XML body. The first part is now set up. Now for the backend part. This is where we will be using the Progress OpenEdge gateway to call to the app server. By dragging and dropping the gateway into our flow, we can begin configuring the integration with app server. We will be connecting to a classic app server configuration, so we will begin by adding our app server URL, which will be connecting to a local app server on the network. Next, we will be configuring how to execute the ABL code. To do this, we will specify an app server procedure named ws_getCustomers.p and specify its input and output parameters. These are both defined as long chars in the Progress ABL code. This should be sufficient to execute the code. The ABL code is designed to accept a single input value corresponding with the customer ID from the request and will output the customer data in XML. In order to finish this flow, we will need to make sure the customer ID as provided by the REST client through the REST URL gets mapped to the Progress ABL input parameter, as we will need to make sure that the XML data is returned by the procedure is transformed into JSON format for the REST client to process. First step will be to map the customer's ID from the REST URL. The REST consumer will automatically assign all URL parameters to connect message headers with the same name. This will allow us to map this header to a new empty message part using the message enricher. By dragging and dropping the message enricher just before the OpenEdge gateway, we can configure a message part to be added by clicking the plus sign. We will use the add function and specify a part named MSG PRT0. Per value, we use the header syntax to retrieve a header from the message. This is done by specifying the value :headers and then between brackets customer ID. This will allow ConnectPlaza to retrieve the header that corresponds with the customer ID. Be sure to set override to true. Next, we click on Save. Next up is transforming the XML output into JSON format. This can be done easily by adding the XML to JSON converter to our flow just after the OpenEdge gateway. There is only one relevant setting here, and that is to omit the XML root element, as it is usually not relevant when dealing with JSON format. Click on Save. And we're almost done here. The inputs and outputs have been mapped and the OpenEdge gateway has been configured. Final thing to do is to make sure the response data is recognized correctly by the REST client. And this involves setting the proper content type on the response. This is achieved by adding a header enricher just after the JSON converter. This enricher will have one item to add a header named content type to the message headers with value application/JSON charset equals UTF-8. This will make sure the client will properly interpret the data. After this has been set, we need to return to the REST consumer and add the content type header value to the mapped response headers to ensure that this header is properly sent back to the client. By clicking Save, we're all done and can continue to deploy the interface and test our flow. After deployment is complete, we can use a testing tool such as Postman to test our REST API by using the get URL http localhost :8088/customers/customer ID/123. We will be able to collect a customer record with ID 123. Changing the ID will also deliver a different customer. When leaving the customer ID blank, we should see all data be returned. I hope you will find these tutorial videos useful, so be sure to like and subscribe to our channel and be notified as we add more tutorial videos for ConnectPlaza. Thanks for watching.